Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport, and many teams have shown their desire to join the grid in the last few years. But no new teams have actually been confirmed since Haas entered the sport in 2016, despite many organisations, including Andretti, showing interest and having the financial backing. So why is this the case, and why is setting up a new F1 team so difficult? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Barriers to entry. The Concord Agreement is a contract between all 10 teams in the sport, the governing body, the FIA, and Formula One themselves for the next 5 years. This allows the team to commit their futures in the sport, and in return the sport offers guarantees regarding the different aspects of the team's environment, including the television revenues and prize money. The specifics of the agreement are kept behind closed doors. However, in the latest 2021 Concord Agreement, the team set up a new barrier to entry for new entrants. A $200 million cost for a brand new team to join the sport, which would be split equally amongst the existing 10 teams. So that means that a new outfit would be giving their competitors a financial boost in order to get a seat at the table. Now this may sound a bit ridiculous, but there are some logical reasons for this. With the cost cap in Formula One, there was a risk that many teams would try to join the sport and would not invest enough in their team to be competitive. Formula One has learned lessons from the past, where teams came into the sport and weren't prepared to make the financial investments required to succeed. The outcome was a damaged reputation for the competition as a whole, and huge impacts for the drivers and team personnel involved in those setups with redundancy and uncertainty. The 3 teams that joined in 2010 on the promise of a budget cap in the future were certainly victims of these false promises, but also they had short-term funding rather than sustained long-term ambition. As a result, the 3 teams of Lotus, HRT and Virgin failed to achieve the results they needed to stay afloat, and had all left the sport through various guises by the end of the 2016 season. This short stint for these teams was bad for the sport as a whole, and would have been at risk of happening again with the current state of Formula One. With the cost of running in Formula One now reduced and fixed with the new budget cap, the new team entrant fee has ensured that a team must be willing to invest in their future in Formula One and really commit to the sport. As a result, the teams that are now interested in joining Formula One know the financial commitments required to get onto the grid and succeed, and are aware of what the top teams in F1 are paying to win. It's not just a cost for the new team though, as they will be entitled to prize money from their first year of competition, something that they wouldn't have been entitled to previously. So the new entrant cost is the first of the barriers between the new teams and joining the sport. On top of this, you have some challenges from the Formula One group themselves. The current CEO of that group, Stefano Domenicali, publicly stated that he doesn't believe Formula One needs an 11th team on the grid and doesn't see the benefit of having a new entrant. This is contrary to the opinions of many Formula One fans who would be excited to see new teams enter Formula One. It's an interesting prospect though, as Domenicali himself described January as an important month for Formula One, with the Volkswagen Group at the time considering an entry into the sport. Now admittedly, this is not necessarily as a brand new team, but rather Porsche and Audi investing in an existing setup. But it does feel like there's more interest from the F1 side for teams that are car manufacturers as opposed to independent setups. This does make sense from a commercial perspective, but when you have the entry like Andretti Global, who claim to have the financial backing and clearly have a strong desire to enter Formula One, it makes you think that there should be at least some interest in this entry as well. Given recent events, there's a potential option that might keep all parties happy. Before I look at that option, I want to take a moment to ask you to consider subscribing to Behind the Drive. According to my YouTube statistics, most of you watching haven't yet hit the subscribe button, so if you're enjoying my videos, then please do hit the subscribe button. Thanks. A combined bid effort. Formula One is never easy to enter, particularly for an independent team. With the Volkswagen Group showing an interest in joining the sport, Porsche was talking with Red Bull to invest in that team. However, recently talks between those two parties have broken down, with Porsche expecting a 50% share in the Red Bull F1 team as a whole, and the Red Bull party expecting the partnership to be primarily based on the newly set up Red Bull Powertrains division. So with those talks broken down and an independent team with the financial backing required but without the car manufacturer team name, it seems almost logical that these two organisations could combine their forces to keep many parties happy. Formula One would be happy to see a manufacturer team join the grid, as well as certain assurances that would be offered from a financial perspective. Andretti would be able to enter the sport, and Porsche would still be able to compete. It's not all as straightforward as that though, considering Andretti has a desire to create an American F1 team, which will bring young American drivers into Formula 1, as well as building the car and potentially the power units in America. This is a concession that Porsche would likely have to offer, but it would surely create an attractive proposal to Formula 1 and the other teams on the grid. Similarly, Porsche would have been looking forward to partnering with Red Bull, considering their sustained success over the last few years, particularly in the new aerodynamic regulations for this year. Partnering with Andretti on this project would be a very different situation for them. The two organisations have created a partnership elsewhere in motorsport though. The Avalanche Andretti team partnered with Porsche in Formula E for the start of Season 9. In this instance, Porsche will create the powertrain and other support services for the team. So there is a relationship between these parties already, and therefore it isn't a stretch to see them potentially forge a partnership in Formula 1 as well. This hypothetical partnership could become Andretti's best opportunity to get onto the F1 grid, and personally, I think that most of the teams on the F1 grid would support this new team as well. Having manufacturer teams on the grid is generally a positive thing, and I would expect the long-term ambitions for this setup would be to get to the top. That in itself is never an easy challenge to achieve, as there have been many teams like Renault that have struggled to get themselves to the top, or even progress up the order despite lots of investment and commitment to the sport for a long time now. So it's not enough to throw money at Formula 1 and expect success. It takes strategic investment over time in both people and facilities. So this combined effort is just hypothetical, but there seems to be upsides for many parties involved in this situation. Should F1 consider more new entries? Getting into Formula 1 is certainly not as easy as it once was, and I think it's right that there should be a high barrier to entry for new teams in Formula 1. Personally, the hypothetical combined effort of Andretti Global and Porsche would be a great thing for the sport. A new entrant on the grid with that kind of racing pedigree and backing would be excellent for the sport, and the new American team could become a setup that the growing American F1 audience could get behind and support. I think having Porsche on the grid would also be a positive for F1. The team have had limited success in Formula 1 in the past, but have been a strong competitor in many forms of motorsport, especially in endurance racing. Having the manufacturer competing with the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari and Aston Martin would be great to see on the Formula 1 grid. Personally, I don't believe it's likely that this will happen, particularly not before 2026. One of the key things that attracted Porsche and Red Bull was their new powertrains division and the prospect of being involved in the updated power units. But fundamentally, the core designs of the current power units were there with Red Bull for the team to build on going into the future. The prospect with Andretti is very different. There's no existing intellectual property, and there is a chance that the Andretti team would want to set themselves up in the USA, which might not be an attractive proposition for that team either. Andretti themselves might not be interested in the partnership either. Certainly from the outside, it appears that they're very proud to be an independent entrant into the sport, so the thought of partnering with Porsche might not be as appealing. As for the prospect of other teams joining the sport, well, Audi is confirmed to be joining from 2026 as a power unit manufacturer. However, there remains speculation that they'll be taking over from Alfa Romeo, whose partnership with Sauber is ending at the end of 2023. So again, for a new team to join the sport, the best option for them is to invest in an existing setup. Perhaps this is a bad thing for Formula 1, as it seems very difficult to enter a new team. However, what it has done is ensured the value of existing teams within the Concord Agreement. For me, I think that's of great importance, and perhaps it's more important to secure the future of the existing 10 teams rather than strive for new entries onto the F1 grid. And if you want to learn more about the history of Andretti's attempt to join the F1 grid from earlier this year, then watch this video next.